Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Welcome to this month's Luxel webinar. We appreciate your time being here. We have actually quite an international crowd today, so welcome everyone wherever you may be in the world. My name is Jared Edwards. I'm joined here with, actually we got quite a number of guys in the room today. We got Josh Thurman, we've got Brandon Young, and we've got Ryan Harder with us. So quite a good little group. So hopefully we'll be able to take care of all the things that you may have questions on and go through some of the ways that we have tried to make our product very simple to set up. All right, with that, let's jump into easy network setup here a little bit. Our agenda today is going to be fairly straightforward and simple. We're going to talk just a little bit about effortless and easy setup and why we've tried to do that. We're going to have two different scenarios that we'll walk through, and in each of those scenarios, it will include some of these different products, whether it's a wireless or a wired router, an access point, a wireless controller, and a switch. We'll go through all of those in, like I said, two different scenarios, and then we will stop along the way and have some question and answer time if that's needed. Then we'll do it, of course, again at the end for some question and answer as well, if there's still something that we haven't covered yet. So let's jump in. Why are we talking about easy setup today? Well, number one, as a dealer, you guys make money by being able to get in and out of a job really quickly and really efficiently. If you're on a job site, you generally have lots of different products that you're installing and different things, and they're all different manufacturers and they all have to be configured properly. And the network is generally one of the things that goes in first because it is, of course, the foundation that all of those other devices are probably going to run on. And so it takes a few minutes for you to get your network up and running, and it's probably one of the first things you're going to do. Because of that, if you get stuck by setting up your network, then everything else down the line can also be delayed, and that's certainly something that we want to avoid. So we want to make it so that you can get in and out and configure the product very quickly and get your network up and running so that you can continue on with your installation. The other reason why we try to do this is because you don't have to be a quote-unquote network guru in order to get a Luxel network going. Certainly there are lots of advanced features and things that you can do with our products. But what we're going to focus on today is the ease of it and the quickness that you can have to just get a network up and going. And you don't have to be an IT manager or network guru in order to get that running. And we'll show you what we mean by that. Bottom line here is we're trying to save you time as a dealer, increase your efficiency, and make you more money because you're more efficient now. The thing is that, of course, if we can make your job easier, then everybody wins. Your installation goes faster and smoother, you're more efficient, you make more money, you're happy with the product because it went in the way that it was supposed to, everything's working great, and we make money as well, and everybody's happy. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here, is if we can make your job easier, then everyone wins. So let's jump into our first scenario today. And let's talk about a little bit of a medium-size installation. And what I mean by medium size is it could be a small, small to medium-sized home or a business, approximately 3,000 to 4,000 square feet or so. You have a typical construction of wood framing and drywall. So we're not dealing with older construction materials like lath and plaster walls. We're not dealing with metal studs. We're not dealing with cinder block or concrete or anything like that for this scenario. It's just regular wood stud framing and drywall. In this system, you're going to have a couple of wired devices, not too many, maybe 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there, and approximately 25 to 30 wireless devices, because let's be honest, there's always more wireless devices on a network than people think there are. So if you ask a customer how many devices you think you're going to be on the network and he says 4 or 5, you could probably plan on that being closer to 20 or more. So let's say in this scenario, you've got 25 to 30 devices or so. You decide that based on what you know about this installation and the construction type, that you're going to install one wireless router, but you're going to plan for an access point during the pre-wire stage because you're smart enough to realize that, hey, look, this might cover everything that I need just from the one wireless router. but there's a possibility that something is going to be in the way interference-wise, whether that's RF or physical construction type, and you might need to have another access point. So you plan for that up front, and you run a couple of different wires in different locations so that you have the option of putting in an access point if you need to down the road. Then you get to that point of the back end of the installation and you're doing a wireless survey on site, and you determine that you indeed do need that additional access point. So you're going to end up putting, in this case, the wireless router on one side of the building, and you're going to put the access point on the other side, just to kind of keep things in simplistic terms. So let's set up a 3150 router, a wireless router, and an XAP 1510 access point, okay? Now, a couple of things about this, and this is part of the simple process. On the back of the 3150, the first thing that I would do is plug in the internet connection or the WAN connection from your ISP modem. Now, there's a couple different ISP modem options, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I would plug that in first, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. Second thing I would do is plug in the power cable, of course, and then once that is done, you can power on the router. Of course, any one of these 4 LAN connections can be used to plug in any device that you need to or want to on the network. Or you can go to a switch and then plug everything, all of your devices into that particular switch. That's it. That's pretty simple. That's all you need to do as far as that goes. So what I've got in this particular scenario here set up is I've made all of my connections of power and internet or WAN connection coming in. And then from my first LAN port, I'm going to a PoE injector and then to the access point. So just to kind of give you an idea of the layout of what this system is. Very, very simple system. Now, I mentioned just a minute ago that there are a few different options with modems. So let's talk about a few little tips and tricks with modems that can maybe help you out. When we're talking about modems, there's basically 2 types that you're going to come across. The first type is just a modem. The second type is a modem router combo. And let's go through each one of those real quickly to give you a little bit of an idea as to the differences, because they are very different. First off, if you're dealing with just a modem, most likely it's going to be just a modem only when you're using your service provider is a cable service provider. So in the United States, that's going to be someone like Comcast or Cox or someone like that, for an example. And the reason this is because cable companies generally allow you to have just their internet service, and you can go and get just a modem that enables that internet service only. Just a modem is going to be serving up a single WAN IP address. So it will connect to one single device at a time when you plug it in. I've actually taken a screenshot here from the user interface of our router here to show you what a WAN IP address coming in looks like. And you can see right in this area here under IP address that it does not look like a standard IP. You will not see 192.168 or 10.0 or anything like that. It's going to be much more random numbers in this particular case. The thing about a modem is it can authenticate generally one device at a time, which means whichever device you plug it into first, it's kind of going to create a little bit of a bond with that device. And it only wants to talk to that device after that. So if you plug it into a computer before you plug it into your modem, it may attach to that computer and only want to talk to that particular device. If you unplug it and plug it into your router, you may not get the external WAN IP address and populate these fields here in the user interface of the router. So because of that, there's a real quick little trick you can do, and that is to reboot the modem if necessary. In fact, it's very common for you to be able to reboot the device and actually reboot the modem before you plug the router into it. So a very common practice is reboot the modem, wait a few minutes until it's fully booted back up, plug in the modem to that internet or WAN interface on the router, and then power up the router. And generally that makes them work together very well. Your modem will authenticate with your router and likes to talk to that device, and everything's great from there on out. If you're talking about a modem router combo, again, this is a very different scenario because the modem router combo will not be serving up a single WAN IP address. It will be serving up LAN IP addresses. So an example here is going to be much more common to what you're seeing, 192.168. something, and I've taken a screenshot here that you can see of an example of when you're serving a LAN IP address coming into the router itself. And you'll notice that it will be a 192.168 or a 172.16 or a 10.0, depending upon what IP address scheme your modem router combo is serving up. The one thing and trick that you want to watch out for here is to verify that the subnet of the router is different from the subnet of whatever your modem router combo is serving. So for example, we all know that Luxel by default is a 192.168.0 subnet. And the .0 is the third octet number there, and that's the one that's important in this case. You want to make sure that whatever is coming in from your modem router combo is different than .0, whether it's 1, 2, 10, or as you can see in this case, 101. It doesn't matter what that is, just so long as it's not .0. So if you can keep an eye out for those two tips and tricks, if it's just a modem, maybe requires a reboot before you plug it into the router. And if it's a modem router combo, make sure that it's on a different subnet than .0. Your installation from the router on will be very, very smooth. All right, so let's jump into a little bit of a setup demo here. And we're going to go into our 3150 to begin with. And here's the interface of the 3150. And again, this is the simple setup way to do things. You'll notice that on the top left here, the page that we're on is called Quick Setup. And literally for a very simple installation, in order to get a network up and going, this is the only page that you will need to do anything on. Because at the top here for your WAN settings, if you've gone through the modem or modem router combo tips and tricks like we've just talked about, the router automatically takes care of all of the connections from that point. When it boots up, it will ask the modem for an IP address and it will get one. You do not have to do anything. Under the network and LAN section here, you also don't have to do anything unless for some reason you need or want to change this subnet. Most likely you're not going to want to, especially if you are trying to avoid having the same subnet on a modem router combo and you've just gone through the steps to make sure that it is not on a .0 subnet. So again, 90+% of the time, you're not going to have to do anything here either. Really, the only thing you're going to have to do is set up the Wi-Fi settings. And that is done right here in these two sections, one for 2.4 gig and one for 5 gig. So let's do that. Let's change the SSID name, and let's say we're going to call this 3150 demo. And I'm going to change my security mode to WPA2 because that's the most common and the most secure type of security. And let's create a password, 3150 password. I'm going to do the same thing on the 5G. And for purposes of this, I'm just going to name it the same. I'm going to again change my security and name it 3150 password. And then I'm going to save that. And the router is going to come back and tell me that I need to reboot to make those changes permanent. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to reboot. Now, while it reboots, what it's doing is configuring your Wi-Fi settings and making sure that everything else in the router is correct, that it has an external IP address, that it's connected to all the devices that you need it to connect to, and so on. So while that's rebooting, are there any questions that we need or want to address currently? Question came up about should we name the 2.4 and the 5 gig the same SSID? And this question came up before when we talked about the wireless controller a couple months ago, but I'll give you the same answer. It really kind of depends on your installation. For the most part, naming them the same is perfectly fine because that allows your mobile device to decide on its own whether it's going to be connected to 2.4 or whether it's going to be connected to 5. There are some devices out there that are very, very aggressive towards 5 gig. And so sometimes they try to stay attached to the 5 gigahertz frequency, even though they're not in a very good 5 gigahertz coverage area, but they are in very good 2.4 gig coverage area. And so if that's the case, sometimes it makes sense to separate them out and make them and name them differently, just so that you can control which device is on which frequency. But for the most part, naming them the same is just fine. All right, we've got our router back up now, and literally that is it. Our setup is done. Our network is up and running. That's all I had to do. And you can see how, from a network standpoint of trying to keep things simple, that's pretty simple. I literally set up my Wi-Fi SSID and password, and I'm done. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, there are several things and lots of deep features that you can go into and configure in our systems. But for purposes of this and to try and keep it simple, this is as easy as it gets, and this is really all you need to do. Now, remember, this is just step one of the setup because I have my wireless router on one side of the installation and I've got an access point on the other. The neat thing about the 3150 router, and both of our wireless routers actually, because the 1200 does the same thing, is that it has our wireless controller built in. So unlike in potentially other systems, you do not have to go log into the access point. Once the router's up and running, you now want to boot up that access point. And instead of logging into it individually, you will go down here to the wireless controller function and go into AP assignment. And you will see that 1510 that we've got on the other side of the office or the home, whichever case it may be, is here in your AP assignment screen. Now, right now, that access point does not broadcast the same SSID and password that you just set up in the router. However, in order to correct that, all we need to do is add this access point to our controller function. So we'll select it, and you can click either select all if you've got more than one, or you can just click on the individual access point, and we're going to add it. And you'll see that the system is now configuring, and what's happening is the router has now reached out to the access point and is configuring it with the same SSID and password that we just set up inside the router. So all of those settings that you just put in there are now being pushed to the access point, and you've done it with literally a few clicks. And you saw how quick that was. Our status is a green check mark, so everything's online and running, and everything's good to go. Our access point is now set up and is broadcasting the same SSID and password that. Hey, so again, the Roam Assist technology is another thing that comes along with this. So now you're able to seamlessly roam between that access point and this and that router without having any drop-offs and things like that. So it's a really neat little system, and that's why we call it Active Roam Assist, and that's why we call it a wireless system. It's not just an individual access point and an individual router working together. All right. So with that, let's jump back into here. And are there any questions or anything that have come up?
Yeah, Jared, really quick, I've got a couple questions just concerning bridge mode. Should you go in bridge mode? Should you be out of bridge mode? When you're in bridge mode, you get a different subnet still? Do you still need a different subnet? So just some clarifications on bridge mode, why you need it, and that.
Yeah, great question. Yes, if you're dealing with a modem router combo, there are two modes that you can certainly take a look at. One is bridge mode, and if your modem router combo does not happen to have bridge mode in it, another one is called the DMZ mode. We're not talking about those today. The theme of this, of course, is keeping everything simple, But yes, you certainly can enable bridge mode or DMZ. And if you do, then you should get the external IP address all the way through that modem router combo and into your Luxel router that you're putting in. So the external IP address will show in that screen. Most modem router combos will do that. Some of them will still show a local IP address, but it does bypass the firewall and you're still in bridge mode. So we do have more education and training materials on that, or you're welcome to reach out to us and we can go through that in more detail. Okay, great questions so far. Let's go to our next scenario. And let's talk about a little bit of a larger size installation. For this one, we're going to talk about a larger building, approximately 6,000 square feet or more, could be up to 8,000, could be 10,000, could be 20,000, who knows. It could be a home or a business or a warehouse, whatever the structure may happen to be. Again, we're talking about a typical construction material of wood framing and drywall, so we're not dealing with any of the other factors with Wi-Fi, just to keep it simple. In this particular installation, you have a lot more going on from an automation or a network standpoint, because you've got an automation system with lots of different wired devices on it. There could be some touch screens, there could be some video over IP devices, there could be multiple controllers around the home for the automation system. Whatever the case may be, you've got a lot of wired devices. And then you've got 50 plus wireless devices as well. You've got people all over the place, each with several different devices and lots of different things going on with the Wi-Fi. Most of your equipment in this scenario is going to be a central rack location. Obviously, the APs aren't going to be there because they're going to be distributed around the home for coverage area. And you may have some situations like touchscreens or, like I said a minute ago, automation controllers. Any of those things could be located throughout the home or business as well. But most of it's going to be centralized in a rack. So in this particular installation, you decide that you're going to use a wired router, a standalone wireless controller, and a managed switch with multiple access points around the location so that you can have the coverage area that you need. So in this case, we're going to set up a couple of different individual pieces. We're going to set up an EPIC 5 or an ABR 5000 router, a AMS 4424P managed switch, an XWC 1000 wireless controller, and multiple access points. Okay, so let's talk about the connections that we've got going on here. Again, from an easy setup standpoint, the first thing I would do is come from your ISP modem or modem router combo into the first WAN port of the ABR 5000. Then it's very simple from there. You pretty much plug the power cable in and turn the power button on. It's pretty simple. Again, with the modem or the modem router, you want to take the steps that we talked about earlier to either reboot the modem or make sure that you're on a different subnet from .0. And as long as you do that, then your router will automatically get an IP address. And like I said, everything will be blue sky from that point out. What I've got for here is out of the first LAN connection, I'm running that out to my switch. And as you'll see in a moment, I'm going to plug everything else into my switch. For the XWC 1000, this is also very simple. You literally plug in a network connection. This one happens to be coming from my switch, and then I plug in the power cable, and it starts to power up. That's it for your wireless controller. As far as the switch goes, here's what I've got going on here. From the router, I've got going into port 1 of my switch. Port 2 of the switch is going to the controller. Then I've got port 3 and port 4 going to two different access points. Of course, I could have 4 or 5 or 6 access points, however many was required for that particular job. But in this case, I've got 2 here, and they're plugged into ports 3 and 4. Then, of course, I want to plug the power cable in and turn the power button on and let the switch boot up. Because this is a PoE switch, when I turn this on, the access points are also going to boot up. And that's an important step when we get to the controller here in just a moment. So remember that. Of course, all of these other ports can be available for any of the network devices that you've got that you need to plug in for whatever the system is that you're putting in. All of those, of course, are still readily available for you to use for any network device. So let's jump into setting up this particular system here. So I'm going to go back to my login screen. And you'll see that I am connected to the ABR 5000 router. And I'm by default on this same quick setup screen. Again, there might not be anything that you need to do. In fact, most of the time there won't be, because this DHCP is going to be automatic from getting an IP address from your modem or modem router combo. You'll notice that the thing that's missing at the bottom here is there's no Wi-Fi settings. And that, of course, is because there is no Wi-Fi being broadcast from this router. It is going to be from the access points and the wireless controller system. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So as long as you've done those steps with the modem and the modem router combo, again, this should be set up pretty automatically, and you really shouldn't have to do anything inside here. So let's open a new tab and now set up our wireless controller. That is on a default IP address of .19. So we'll go into that, type in admin as our default username and password. And you'll see that this also is very simple because it by default comes up with a 4-step wizard that you walk through, and it literally walks you through it. So the first thing is to make sure that your IP address and your default gateway of the controller are the same as the router. So if you have left your router on a .0 subnet, you can leave it there. Default gateway of .0.1 is also going to be the gateway, and that is the IP address of the router. And so you're good to go there. All you'll need to do is click Next. And the controller starts to configure itself and look for the access points that are on the network. Now remember, just a moment ago, I said that when you power up your switch, those access points are going to be powered up. Well, step 2 of the controller is to check itself to make sure that it is on the latest firmware. And so what it's going to do when I click this is it's going to go out to the cloud and make sure that it is, it's got its latest firmware. If it is, then it will go to step 3. If it is not, then it will automatically start to update itself and then move to step 3. Now you notice a pop-up window here that says, please reboot your access points now and wait for 2 minutes. This is a great time to do that. All you need to do is unplug them from the Ethernet cables from the switch, wait about 10 seconds, and then plug them back in. And the reason that it asks you to do that is because as part of the boot up process for the access points, they look for the controller on the network. And when they find it, as you'll see here in just a moment, the access points will come up as being shown inside the controller, and you can then easily configure them. So in this case, I actually have 2 access points here that I'm going to set up, and it looks like they are also on their current firmware version. So I need to head to step 3, so I'll click Next, and now I have the same screen as what I did on the other router where I set up my username and password. So again, for ease of use, we're just going to set up, we'll just call this the 5000 demo, and we'll change our security mode here. Call it 5000 password. And we'll do the same thing for the 5 gig. And then we hit Next. And it gives you a listing here of all of the SSIDs that you're going to configure on the access points. So if everything looks good, I click Next. And now it is, again, pushing all of this information from the controller out to each access point. And your access points will now work together not only from a seamless roaming standpoint, but also from a SSID and password standpoint. So as mobile devices walk across this home or building and go from one side to the other, they will stay connected, they will seamlessly roam and have no drop-offs. And that's it. We're done with the wireless now. It's all set up and running. And that's it. That's setting up your network. Now, there was one other component in this system, which was the switch. So let's log into the switch right now. And the switch is going to be on .4. And again, we're using a managed switch here. Now, a lot of times people have the tendency to be a little hesitant to use a managed switch because that generally means, oh no, I have to do something with it, and I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing. So I'm a little bit apprehensive about this, and I don't necessarily want to use a managed switch. Well, here's the cool thing about a managed switch in this scenario as far as keeping things easy. As we followed through these steps, there is nothing that I have to set up in the switch. In fact, I didn't even need to log into it. I just did that so that I could show you that it was there and it was working. But you don't have to set up anything inside your switch. Now, of course, there are lots of different things you can do with a managed switch, but my point is there's no need to be apprehensive about a managed switch. If you're using one for PoE purposes and you're trying to keep your setup very, very simple, you don't have to do anything inside the switch if you followed these steps. Okay, so we're set up. That's literally it. We're done. So with that, any questions on that particular system or anything else that we have come across so far? Have a question here regarding different channels on the access points. And currently, with the current firmware that's in the controller, all of the access points will be on the same channel. Part of the reason for that is because mobile devices roam a little easier and a little faster and a little more seamlessly when they're all on the same channel. There is a firmware version that is in the works that will allow for multiple channels, but as of right now, everything is on the same channel.
Jared, we have a lot of questions actually regarding how many access points can you add to the system with the wireless router. A lot of questions on AP limits. If you could address that, please.
Yeah, sure. Great question. On the wireless controllers, whether it's an XWR 3150 or an XWR 1200, you can add up to 2 more access points for a total of 3 points of access, the router being the third point there that you can seamlessly roam across. With the standalone controller, you can add up to 16 access points that you can use however you want for seamless roaming for that scenario. So 2 on the wireless routers and 16 on the standalone wireless controller. Okay, great. I'm hearing lots of good questions that have come in that have been answered, so we will move on here. Just to let you know, there are more webinars and more education to come. This webinar focused on keeping things very, very simple and very easy to set up. We know and realize that there's other products that are out there that have very, very simple setup requirements. Some of them even have an app, which is also something that we're contemplating and looking at as well. But our purpose today was to show you that even though we might not have this fancy new little app, this is still very, very easy and very simple to set up. So with upcoming webinars, we will have more difficult topics, and there's going to be a range from, like I said, easy setup here, all the way up to more difficult topics and more in-depth topics that you have also requested. So those are coming. There's also more how-to videos and online content in general coming as well, so that you can get to the information that you need on demand when you need it. So that is also in the works. With that, I'll open it up to any remaining questions, and we will answer those now. A couple of questions about guest networks and VLANs, and we typically, or excuse me, on purpose did not talk about that today. We do have a VLAN webinar that we will be doing specifically that will be all about going in depth with VLANs, step by step of how to set them up, how to set up a guest network and why you want to do it and the advantages of that. So did not go over that today because again, the theme was simple setup, but we will be going over that in a future webinar. The other question that came up is we do have a design team as well that can help you out with the designs for whatever the situation you may be looking at. Again, whether it's a home or a business, we can get your plans if you can send them over to us. The email is the same, sales@luxel.com, And if you have blueprints or if you've drawn a sketch out on a napkin and taken a picture of it and send it, whatever it is, our design team is more than willing to help you through and help you design what products you need, where you should place access points, that type of a thing as well. So please reach out and use that service. It is a free service. We do not charge for it. Anything else? Looks like having a lot of these guys in the room has been a good thing because a lot of questions are being answered. All right, well, it looks like most of the questions are being answered directly via chat. Again, thank you for your time today. Hopefully this has been beneficial to you. Like I said, we will have more webinars coming up that will have multiple different topics, some of them much more in depth. But again, appreciate your time, and hopefully this has been beneficial as far as reminding all of us that, hey, networking is not something that needs to be a big hill or a big mountain for us to climb. It can be very easy and simple to set up with the right equipment. So thank you again for your time wherever you may be located, and have a great day.